Welcome back, everybody. This month's complete set is going to be actually partially a video response to Scott Maz's channel and his request to show us your favorite set. But also it's going to be me showing you a set that actually was a passion project. I think about 15 years ago now, I think is when I completed this set. So that would have been about 2007, I think, is when I finished this set. So it was one that I took on. It was probably my first really challenging set to be able to complete, and it was one that I knew I was going to love when I did it anyway, because it was a set that I'd been wanting to complete, and my favorite set, vintage set, up until that point when I was putting it together, and to this date, it's still one of my favorite vintage sets. So I'd been meaning to show this one at some point, and I was kind of holding it back just because I knew it was one that I would be a lot of fun to show, and I wanted to kind of have a bit of a build up to it, but just because of Scott's opportunity and the giveaway that he's doing with it, I just thought now is kind of the good time. Scott's a great guy, really into some of the same stuff that I am too. His channel is starting to pick up quite a bit. He's up to about 142 subs as I talk right now. And he just got some really cool stuff in his collection, a mixture of vintage, modern, and a lot of unopened product too. So he's kind of a fun guy to be able to kind of converse with too on YouTube, so I can't recommend him enough. And his channel is just his name, Scott Maz, M-A-Z is his last name. And he's local to the area too, so he's another guy that is into Chicago sports, which obviously I quite admire as well. All right, so this one is going to be a card or a set that I actually picked up a card from at a card show over the spring when somebody was looking to kind of cash out of the hobby. I was able to pick up this Willie Mays card for $10. And it's not a card I probably would have bought for my set at any point in time because it's actually got a bit of a crease up here in the corner. So it's not something I probably would really like seek out and say this is going to be an upgrade. I just thought it was a price I couldn't really turn down. So we're actually going to be doing the 1972 top set. The 1972 top set was released over the course of 6 series, with the 6th series being short printed. Not nearly as short printed as some of the super short prints from like the 1960s and the 1950s, but for the 70s, it's the most short printed one. And probably in maybe like the top 5 to 6 as far as like short printed top sets, as far as the final series. So the last that set of cards really does kind of carry a premium, and there's a lot of star power in that last series, including some updated traded cards of some guys that are baseball Hall of Famers. So as you can see, the design is very much 1970s, including from how they present the text to the colors selected and a lot of the uniforms that the players are wearing during that time, because you saw a lot of the zip-ups starting to come in there, and they weren't buttoned-up shirts anymore. They're just like softball kind of shirts that actually didn't have to be buttoned up or zipped up kind of came into style. And obviously the super tight uniforms where you really couldn't hide it if you're a bit out of shape as a ball player. So this is the basic design. It's got white borders, so they do kind of hold up a little bit better to wear and tear. It doesn't show it as well as, say, like 71 or even 1970. So it's also a pretty presentable set, even in mid-grade, as opposed to those other ones where it does show a lot of wear when you get a mid-grade 1971 card. The backs have this orange stock and pretty tiny print if you're actually like looking at a player like Willie Mays who's been around for a while. There actually is a series of cartoons on the back of the cards as you kind of go through them. But this is kind of the standard look for the card from 1972. It was the heritage set from last year, so a lot of people are familiar with it because of that reason. So I'm going to be looking forward to kind of walking through the set now and kind of just talking a little bit about 1972. Actually, I probably should look up the 1972 baseball season so I can get you some of the names of the guys who did really well. Let me pull that up real too. Forgot to pull that up before I actually get started to present the set here. So, all right, so now I got it pulled up. Well, here it is. This is what I wanted. All right, and we'll go ahead and get started. Starting with Series 1. In this set, you're going to see some of the expansion teams have been around for a little while. I believe the big change in 72 as far as teams goes, I believe this is the first year where you're going to see the Texas Rangers, if I'm not mistaken. And the last time you'll see Ted Williams on a regularly issued card where he's featured as the manager. So we'll get a chance to present that as we go through. And there's one Baseball Hall of Famer that has his final card in this set, as well as one that has his very first card. All right. Let's jump right into it. You can see it starts with the World Champion card from the Pittsburgh Pirates from the previous season, which is the last one that Roberto Clemente was on. I'll point out some of the stars and Hall of Famers as we go through here. Bobby Valentine, not a Hall of Famer, but a pretty well-known manager during my time. Dave Duncan, pitching coach, pretty well-known under Tony La Russa. Also played with Tony La Russa back in the day. This one's pretty interesting because it's got the halo from A's Stadium above the player Billy Cowan, which kind of makes him look angelic, if you will. So it's an interesting choice by the guy who took the photos at that time. So the first series, it's kind of without Hall of Famers until you hit a series of cards that are coming up in the middle, which are going to be featuring some of the inaction cards. So you can see like down here, here's the first one is Cleon Jones, where he has a base card and there's also an inaction shot. The base cards don't have action photos, unlike in 71, or you see that feature sometimes. They have a standalone action set that pairs up with some of the stars and of the era, and it's featured in each and every series. But the backs of the cards are kind of interesting, and I'll show you those in a second too. So we got Billy Martin featured here. This one's kind of famous for questioning or not whether is he giving the fans or the photographer a middle finger or not, or is it just the way that he's holding the bat? I think people that know Billy Martin thinks it probably was given the finger because that was just kind of the way he was. But I don't know. We'll see. That's always kind of debatable on that one. So just a little bit of history there. So you can see on the back here, there's going to be like things that feature upcoming series. Things are going to be on the backs of the card. Sometimes it's trivia. Sometimes it's going to be player images where you can kind of put a puzzle together. So that's something to kind of look forward to, as well as like seeing some of your favorite players when they were kids, because that was also a thing that was in this set as well. Kari Yastrzemski is our first bona fide Hall of Famer up here in the corner. He's got 2 cards featured in the first series. Rick Wise, who was featured later in the set for a very specific reason. Not a Hall of Famer, but significant for another reason. Here's Willie Mays. You can see my Willie Mays is in better condition than this Willie Mays. That's why it's not an upgrade. There's his in-action picture. Harmon Killebrew, featured twice here. That was fan favorite Bud Harrelson for the New York Mets. Red Shandies, Hall of Fame player and manager. Always a fun name to say, Bert Campaneris. And here we go. Here's our Hall of Fame rookie card that's from this set. This is also why it's pretty collectible. There's not a lot of high price valued cards in here as far as rookies go, and the rookies in the low series, so it has more cards printed. Here we go, Carlton Fisk. Next to Tony Perez, also Hall of Famer. When I was putting this set together, I bought a lot of lots, and then I started going after some single cards I needed. I think I was bought a lot of the stuff from Greg Morris Cards, as he was doing that stuff even back then. We had a lot of raw vintage cards that were ungraded. They were able to be picked up. So you could buy a couple of them at once in auctions and things like that, and that's what I commonly did to be able to complete this set. So within the set, we also have the league leader cards. There's going to be a couple Hall of Famers that are littered throughout these, including newer Hall of Famer Tony Oliva and the batting leaders. In all RBI leaders, we got Stargell and Aaron, also Hall of Fame manager Joe Torre. RBI leaders in the American League, we got 2 Hall of Famers, Killebrew and Robinson. Home run leaders, we got Stargell and Aaron. AL home run leaders, we have Reggie. And all ERA leaders, Tom Seaver's listed in there. Jim Palmer on the American League side. And this one's really cool because it's got 3 Hall of Famers featured on it for the NL pitching leaders: Jenkins, Carlton, and Seaver. Down here in the strikeout leaders, we got Seaver and Jenkins. Frank Robinson up in the corner here. Last card he's featured on with the Baltimore Orioles. Got some great sideburns going on by this point, which was the style at that time. Bill Buckner, not his rookie card, but his second-year card. He does have a rookie in, I believe, 1970 tops. He's got a rookie card in there, I believe. Ed Farmer, broadcaster for the White Sox for many years, passed away a couple of years ago. Fan favorite for the Phillies, Greg Lunsky, and also played a little bit for the White Sox in the 1980s. Former White Sox manager Jim Fregosi, and then later manager for the Phillies during '93. Bruce Freehand passed away recently, I think last season. Hall of Famer Joe Morgan, still with Houston at this point. Bob Gibson. Dick Williams, Hall of Fame manager. Big old Norm Cash with some chew in his lip there. Dave Kingman. It's another kind of important card for the set, although not a Hall of Famer. Ted Simmons, one of our newer Hall of Famers in the last couple seasons. In 1972, the MVPs were Dick Allen from the Chicago White Sox, who threatened the Triple Crown that season, and Johnny Bench, one of his several MVPs, was won during the 1972 season. We haven't come upon their cards yet, but when we do, I'll point them out. I just love looking at the action cards next to the base cards, especially in some of the series, because they're just kind of littered with Hall of Famers. Not in this particular series, which I think is Series 2. The Cubs team cards through the 1970s were just often floating heads. Never knew the reason why, but it's pretty consistent that that's the case. Orlando Cepeda, Hall of Fame player. Lou Brock. Here's a Ranger card. Denny McLain. Now we're coming up on the playoff cards. We go through the NL playoffs and I believe the AL playoffs. I think maybe you're back-to-back here. So you have the, actually, yeah, it's NL then followed by AL. So you can kind of follow the series. So the NL champion, Pittsburgh Pirates, followed by the Baltimore Orioles. And kind of walks you through the World Series. Card featuring Brooks Robinson there. Clemente, it's a pretty cool card. And obviously the Pirates win. There's Dick Allen, should be in the Hall of Fame in my opinion, but he is not at this point. Raleigh Fingers. Harry Walker has been around forever at this point. I feel like you can find cards from him like from the 40s all the way through the 70s. Not the only one that way, but it's pretty cool. Jim Palmer. Willie McCovey. There's a pretty cool image of him in my opinion. I always thought that one looked kind of cool. I got more in-action cards coming up here. Hank Aaron. It's a little off-center, but the edges and corners are fantastic on the card. But it is off-center. Same thing with the in-action card. Nice part when you start collecting into the 70s, you can find cards in really good condition, which is not always the case for the 50s and 60s unless you're willing to pay a lot for them. Clemente, my favorite card in the set. Final card as an active player. He does have a card after he passed in 73. Another Clemente in action. I got Luis Aparicio. An action shot of him. Earl Weaver, Hall of Fame manager. Jim Hunter, before he grew all his facial hair to become Catfish Hunter. Before Charlie Finley encouraged them all to grow facial hair. All right, now we actually have Boyhood photos of the stars. I think this is the first time they did this, and they had it a couple more times during the decade. We got Joe Torre, Hall of Famer there. And these nice big sideburns there. Willie Stargell. Tom Seaver. You'll see some more later in the set if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked at this one in a while. So I built this one back in 06 and 07 over the course of 2 years. I was still in graduate school at that point. I think I finished it when I first started my first job out of graduate school. So it was a slow burn because I didn't have a lot of money to go around to be able to do it. In fact, I sold a lot of my modern cards to be able to build up enough capital to actually build sets at that point. Sparky Anderson, Hall of Fame manager down here. During this time, I was really knocking out a lot of the 70s, and I would be buying all these lots. And eventually, I would get enough to be able to build my set, minus a few cards I had to buy separately. Then I'd have all these partial sets that I would sell off on eBay typically, and then I would build enough money to be able to kind of then buy into the next set that I was doing. Hasn't worked so well of kind of trying to do that in the 50s and 60s. Sometimes it's harder to get lots like that in bulk and get closer to finishing the sets. For various reasons, and usually as the short prints or just the sheer price of the cards. Dave Soup Campbell. That Willie Davis card's really cool, honestly. Tony Oliva, Hall of Famer there. I learned a lot about the players in the late 60s and 70s just by building sets. I knew of them, but I really got to know them when I was putting these sets together, including all the teams they played for, what years they were all-stars and that stuff. That's been a fun experience for me, and I'm now experiencing that a lot as I'm putting the sets together from the 50s. Ferguson Jenkins. Steve Carlton, his last appearance in a St. Louis Cardinal uniform. Johnny Bench, again the MVP from this season. Good corners and edges, but just off center. Same thing with these cards. Centering is often a major issue with 72, as it is for a lot of the sets in the 60s and 70s. 72 is no exception. Here's a good-looking Reggie Jackson, his in-action card. Maury Will back with the Dodgers, which is pretty cool. Not a Hall of Famer, but still cool nevertheless. Passed away just recently this summer. Billy Williams, Hall of Famer here. Thurman Munson, someone I think belongs in the Hall of Fame. And you have a Tom Seaver that's maybe seen a little too much sunlight. At some point, I'd like to maybe upgrade that one and get one of a darker red in there. His in-action card. Pop Stargell. In-action card. Bob Lemon, Hall of Fame pitcher, manager during the 1970s. Tony La Russa, Hall of Fame manager. Gil Hodges, Hall of Fame player, managing during the 1970s. I think this actually may have been his last card, if I'm not mistaken. I think 73, he had already passed. We're getting into the 5th series now. The 5th series and 6th series, you're going to expect to pay a little bit more. The 6th series, obviously, a lot more, but the 5th series is also shorter printed than the first 4. Not to the same degree. So they're a little more affordable. We got Lou Piniella. Might get in at some point as a manager. It's funny how much like he and Stoudemire kind of looked like their adult images of themselves as children. Sometimes they look very different, but not in this case. And you got Brooks Robinson up in the corner here. Joe Torre, Hall of Fame manager. Ted Williams, his last appearance in a top set as a player or manager was in 1972. Although he is on the team card for 1973, if I'm not mistaken, for the Rangers. Burt Bryleven, Hall of Fame pitcher. Don Sutton, Hall of Fame pitcher. As I was building these sets, sometimes I would just go in and look at the last 2 series that I have. Just got to get so excited when I start pulling off and picking up these cards and knocking cards off my list of my needed list. So I just got kind of excited, kind of looking at some of those images. You have Brooks Robinson up here in the corner. Ron Santo in action. Pete Rose, not Hall of Famer, but obviously the hit king. Juan Marichal down here. This was an in-action photo of his famous windup. Leo the Lip, DeRocher. I can find cards of his from the 30s all the way through the 1970s. That's pretty cool. Given that I put this set together years ago, I don't know how much some of these cards would cost you now, so I may not be the best resource. But I do remember like getting this Nolan Ryan, and that card at that time was going to be a card that's about $20 to $30 in the condition I was looking at. I don't know how much it kind of goes for now, but I was looking for expert or excellent mint, I should say. So excellent plus kind of cards. So that was going to be a higher grade card. So we're talking like probably like if it was graded somewhere like a 5 or higher. So that was kind of what I was looking for these cards at the time. So I don't know how much a Nolan Ryan goes from 1972. In this one, he's got an airbrush hat on there. So this was his first year in California. Al Kaline, one of the pricier cards in the 5th series with Nolan. And now we're jumping into the 6th series in a moment. Phil Niekro, Hall of Famer there. Then we have these really weird award cards where it kind of told you like the Commissioner's Award and the MVP. And if you looked at the back, you'd have the list of everybody that's won it through 1971, obviously because it was the 1972 season. Kind of weird cards. They redid them in Heritage as well. You know, take them for what they're worth. I think they're okay. All right. He marks the beginning of the final series. When I'd buy these lots, sometimes I'd have like one high series card in there. So I buy a lot of like 300 cards and building the sets, and it's all like Series 5 and below. And then I would somehow sometimes have like a 6 series card in there. Don't be fooled. Even some of these commons are a little more pricey than you might think. Like I said, I don't know what the going price is on them now, but I do see some set builders kind of note how expensive some of these cards are as they're putting it together. Still not as expensive as 1967, which is a set I recently finished. Steve Garvey. This is one that's going to be a little more expensive. Not a Hall of Famer, but definitely a star from the 70s and early 80s. Go back into the action shots. So here's a fun one. If you have a Hall of Famer, they got 2 cards in the high series now that are going to be pricey to be able to finish it out. Carew is one of the more expensive ones. The in-action shot's also not cheap. Jim Cott, another Hall of Famer. Bobby, Barry's son, or Barry's father, I should say. Got that backwards. Oh. Sorry, my stomach is a little hungry there. Sorry if it's growling. Bill Russell is another one's going to cost you a little bit more down here. All right, Walt Alston, this one's going to cost you a little more, Hall of Fame manager, and then these 6 here are going to cost you a little bit more too. This is the first attempt to be able to do updated, traded cards within the set. Something they didn't really ever try again. They would sometimes just release the cards in later series and update with the teams, which was kind of their practice before then. And then they started having standalone traded sets in 74 and 76, and it became a constant from 81 going forward. But this one's important because it's got some significant trades in here, starting with, obviously, let's start with actually Steve Carlton. This is when he came over to the Philadelphia Phillies for Rick Weiss. This was a bad trade in the history of the St. Louis Cardinals, but a really big one for the Philadelphia Phillies, as he has become the focal point of their pitching staff that eventually won a World Series. Joe Morgan, obviously, maybe one of the most important parts of the Big Red Machine, although it's hard to say who was more important to the team because they were such a great unit. But that's when he came over and started winning MVPs with the Reds shortly thereafter. And this is when Frank Robinson left the Orioles and then kind of bounced around from a few teams until he actually was managing the Indians and later retired as a former ball player. So these 3 are going to be pricier for you to be able to pick up in good condition. Actually, there's a 7th, Jose Cardinal. I forgot about that one. Bill Mazeroski is also one that costs a little bit more. We have Dusty Baker, another one you can expect to pay a little bit more. Not a Hall of Famer, but might be a manager in the Hall of Fame at some point. Hoyt Wilhelm, his final card, Hall of Fame pitcher. And then going on to the final 4, ending with Ron Reed. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed the set presentation. Again, Scott, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoyed the video, as well as anyone else had an opportunity to watch it. Thank you for watching. Bye.